I never thought I'd be standing in the kitchen of my friend's house at midnight, staring at his mom like she was some secret I'd accidentally uncovered. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon and old books, the kind of scent that makes you feel both comforted and guilty at the same time. I had come over under the excuse of helping her son with a late-night project. But here I was, caught in a silence that felt thicker than the darkness outside the window. She leaned against the counter, one hand gripping the edge, the other twisting the hem of her sweater. Her hair had a soft silver sheen under the dim light, and I swear, for a moment, it caught me off guard. Not because it was beautiful, but because it felt honest, like every line on her face told a story I wasn't supposed to read. "I've never told anyone this before," she murmured. And it wasn't until she looked up at me that I realized she had been speaking to me all along. My stomach did that ridiculous flip that kids my age get in movies. But this wasn't a movie. This was real, messy, complicated, and forbidden in a way I didn't want to define. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The words I wanted to say, me too, I've thought about you, stayed lodged in my throat. Instead, I just stood there, feeling the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, the space between us stretching thinner than it had any right to. She took a slow step closer, and suddenly, the air felt warmer, charged, like it was waiting for something neither of us dared to name. I noticed the small details, the way her eyes flicked to mine for just a fraction longer than polite, the subtle brush of her fingers against her mug as if it grounded her, the slight hesitation in her smile. Everything said more than words ever could. "I know it's strange," she continued, and her voice dropped almost to a whisper. "But sometimes, I wonder what it would have been like if things had been different." I wanted to reach out, to touch her hand, to tell her it didn't matter who she was, what age she was, or what rules I should be following. But I didn't. Instead, I watched her, memorizing the curve of her cheek, the small crease by her eyes, the way she leaned just slightly toward me, though not enough to close the distance. A laugh bubbled out of me, nervous and soft. "Different how?" I asked, my voice almost failing me. She hesitated. Her lips parted, closed, then parted again, like the words weren't ready yet. I realized I was holding my breath, my entire body pulled toward her without permission. There was a vulnerability in her I'd never seen in anyone else, not even my closest friends, and it made my chest ache in a way I couldn't explain. And then, just as the air between us thickened into something unspoken but undeniable, the doorbell rang. Her eyes flicked to the hallway, then back to mine, and in that instant, I felt the full weight of what was happening. This quiet, dangerous, intoxicating closeness. She swallowed, glanced at her mug, and whispered again, almost to herself, "I never thought it would be like this." I didn't move, didn't speak, because I knew whatever waited behind that doorbell would either delay us or force us to confront something we hadn't yet dared to name. I stayed frozen for a beat too long after the doorbell rang. Part of me wanted to run, leave the kitchen, pretend the fluttering in my chest was just nerves. But I didn't. I watched her move, the subtle way her shoulders tensed, as if the sound had startled her more than it had me. She walked toward the hallway, one hand still clutching her mug. "It's probably just a delivery," she muttered, though her voice wavered. I could hear it, like a thread of hesitation stretched through every word. Something in her tone told me she didn't usually live alone, without the constant hum of someone else's presence. And that's when I realized why this felt impossible. Not only was she older, decades older, but she was my friend's mother, someone I'd known in snippets, always at family barbecues or school events. There was history there, of a kind I wasn't supposed to cross. And yet, here we were. Her vulnerability lingered in the kitchen as she returned. She leaned against the counter, eyes flicking toward the living room as if making sure no one else was around. I haven't really had anyone in years," she said quietly, almost ashamed. "After my marriage ended, I buried myself in work, in my kids, in everything but myself." I wanted to tell her I understood that feeling better than she knew, though I was barely 24 and my own romantic failures barely scratched the surface. My own past, messy crushes, The awkwardness of fumbling through feelings I didn't even know how to name suddenly felt like it had been training me for this impossible moment. You? Alone? I asked, though my tone tried to stay light. You're so alive. I'd never guess. She laughed softly, but it didn't reach her eyes. Alive, maybe, she admitted. But lonely, too. And careful. Always careful. I felt that care, that invisible boundary, pressing against the space between us. And I hated it. Not because it made her untouchable, but because it made every small look, every pause in conversation, every almost touch electric. I wanted to lean closer, to brush my fingers along hers as she stirred her coffee, to tell her that none of it mattered to me. Age, history, everything, but I stayed put. Instead, I swallowed hard and let silence speak, letting the air between us hum with tension I didn't yet dare to name. Then she moved slightly, reaching into a drawer for a book. Her hand brushed mine as she passed, and I felt the tiniest spark, enough to make my heart lurch. We froze for a fraction of a second, both of us pretending it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Her eyes met mine for the briefest beat longer than social grace allowed. I didn't need words. The warmth, the unspoken acknowledgement, the way our pasts and secrets hung between us. It was enough. For the first time that night, it felt like we were on the same page, caught in a story neither of us had planned to write but couldn't stop reading. I felt the brush of her fingers linger longer than necessary, and my chest tightened. Every rational thought I had screamed at me. This was insane. She was my friend's mother, a woman with a life and responsibilities I couldn't possibly understand. But my heart didn't care about rational thoughts. You shouldn't be here so late, she whispered, almost accusing, almost pleading. I didn't move. Couldn't. I wanted to talk, I said, voice low, failing to capture the tremor in my hands. My words felt fragile, like they could shatter if she even looked at me wrong. She closed her eyes for a second, then opened them and stared at me in a way that made me want to lean forward, to close the space that shouldn't exist between us. She started, then froze. That's when the front door creaked. Both of us jerked toward the sound. My stomach dropped. Her hand flew to her chest, eyes wide, pupils dilated. I could almost hear the mental panic behind the composed facade she tried to maintain. Just my roommate, I muttered, though the relief in my voice was shaky. She nodded, though neither of us moved to step back, caught in the gravitational pull that had been building all night. The tension thickened, impossibly heavy. Her gaze flicked to mine, lingering, and I felt my pulse racing in sync with hers. I wanted to ask why she looked at me like that, but the words caught in my throat, lost to the storm of emotions I couldn't name. I took a tentative step closer. She didn't pull back. Her breath hitched, a tiny shiver running through her shoulders. You're too young, she murmured, though the trembling in her hands betrayed her. Maybe, I admitted, barely above a whisper. But I can't stop thinking about you. Her lips parted slightly, eyes darting away, then back to mine. The almost words hung between us like a delicate thread, fragile but unbreakable. I leaned in without thinking, drawn by the magnetic pull, by the secret electricity that had been simmering all evening. She leaned forward too, just a fraction, eyes half closed. Our breaths mingled. My heart pounded in my ears. And then, a sudden ring of her phone shattered the spell. She jumped, startled, knocking over her mug. Coffee spilled across the counter. The sound brought me back from the edge, and I took a step back, hands trembling. I should, she whispered, her voice almost lost in the rush of my own rapid heartbeat. She looked away, pretending to clean up the mess, though her hand lingered near mine, inches apart, a silent admission neither of us dared voice. I wanted to reach for her again, to close the distance, but something, guilt, fear, the impossible stakes, kept me frozen. And yet, even as we backed away from the brink, the air between us vibrated with everything we hadn't said, everything we wanted to, and everything we couldn't. The room felt smaller now, the silence heavier. And I knew, deep down, that tonight had changed everything. I couldn't focus on anything else. Every thought circled her. The way she laughed softly when she thought no one was listening. The way her eyes lingered on the edge of a room. The subtle tremble in her hands when she reached for her coffee. And tonight, the world had shrunk down to the two of us in that dimly lit kitchen. She was cleaning up the spilled coffee, but I noticed how her movements were jerky, distracted, like some invisible weight pressed on her. My chest ached with a mixture of frustration and desire. Why couldn't she just say it? Just look at me and admit that she wanted this too, whatever this was between us. "You never call me," she said suddenly, breaking the silence, her voice tight. I froze. There was a sharp edge to her tone I hadn't heard before. I didn't want to. I started, but she cut me off with a shake of her head. "No. I mean, I feel like you're always there, but never really, fully. I see it in your eyes, every time, and yet," her voice faltered, "I keep wondering if you even realize how much I notice you." The words hit me like a punch I didn't see coming. My stomach dropped. I had noticed her, every glance, every hesitation. But hearing it from her made it real, raw, undeniable. I notice you too," I whispered, stepping closer despite every warning in my head. "More than I should." Her eyes widened, flicking toward the hallway as if checking for witnesses. "You don't understand, this is dangerous. For me, for you, for him." Her voice cracked at the last word, her hands gripping the counter. I felt the full weight of the unspoken, the sun, the boundaries, the impossible age gap. I reached out, almost against my better judgment, and brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. She shivered at the touch, eyes closing for a fraction of a second, and my resolve nearly collapsed. "Why do we even feel this?" I asked, voice hoarse. "Why can't we just—" I stopped, words choking me. I wanted to tell her I couldn't stop thinking about her, that every time she smiled or sighed, the world narrowed down to her. But it sounded selfish even in my own ears. She stepped closer, a tremor in her stance, and whispered, "Because it's wrong, and yet, it feels like the only thing that's real." Her confession was a spark in a room already on fire. I wanted to close the distance, to kiss her, to erase every rule that kept us apart. My heart hammered, and I could feel her pulse against her neck, small and rapid. And then, the sound of the front door opening. A creak of the hinges, a casual laugh from the hallway, completely unaware of the storm brewing just feet away. We both froze, eyes locking for one desperate, unspeakable moment. My hand hovered near hers, every instinct screaming to pull back or push forward, and neither of us moved. The world outside our bubble of tension existed, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that fragile electric connection, teetering on the edge of something irreversible. I thought the moment of tension had passed when the footsteps in the hallway receded, but I was wrong. Minutes later, a text buzzed on my phone, sharp and insistent. My chest tightened as I read it. "Mom saw you at her house. Told me everything. Be careful." I dropped the phone on the counter. Heat surged through me, not from guilt, but from the knowledge that the fragile secrecy we'd been holding had cracked. I looked at her, trying to read her face, but she wasn't looking at me. She was staring at her own hands, trembling slightly. "I didn't think anyone would," she started, but the words faltered in her throat. She bit her lip, eyes flicking toward the hallway as if expecting someone to appear out of nowhere. I stepped closer, trying to bridge the sudden chasm. "It's okay," I said, though my voice sounded hollow even to me. "No one's judging us here, just us." Her gaze finally met mine, a mix of fear, longing, and shame swirling together. "It's not just that," she whispered. "He knows, and now, everything feels exposed. I can't." Her words dissolved into silence, but the tension lingered. I wanted to reach out to assure her, but part of me knew there was nothing I could do. The risk wasn't just about us anymore. It was about everyone else caught in this fragile web. My heart ached at the thought, at the way she looked so raw, so human, so unprotected. I don't care what anyone else thinks," I said, almost fiercely. I care about you. That's it. Nothing else matters. Her lips parted slightly, a shiver running through her shoulders. You shouldn't. You don't even realize how complicated this is. I do, I said quietly, stepping closer, letting my hand hover near hers. And I want it anyway. She flinched, but not away. More like toward me, uncertain, caught between desire and fear. The air between us thickened, humming with everything unspoken. I wanted to close the gap, to kiss her, to erase the months of restraint in a single heartbeat. Then came the knock on the door, soft, almost polite, but it cut through the charged silence like a knife. She froze, her entire body stiffening. I felt my stomach drop. Don't, she whispered, almost panicked, though her eyes remained locked on mine. Her hands clenched the edge of the counter, white-knuckled. Somewhere inside, I realized this wasn't just about desire anymore. It was about survival, secrecy, navigating a world that suddenly seemed hostile to the one thing that made sense in the chaos. Yet even with the stakes higher, even with everything threatening to collapse around us, the pull toward her was irresistible. I reached for her hand anyway, just barely brushing her fingers, a silent promise that no matter the consequences, I wouldn't let go. Her gaze softened, fear mingling with something else, something urgent, something electric. The knock came again. She swallowed hard, eyes wide, lips parted as if she wanted to say everything and nothing all at once. And in that suspended moment, neither of us knew what would happen next, but we both knew nothing could ever be the same. The knock at the door kept echoing in my ears, but I couldn't move. Neither could she. The kitchen, the dim light, the spilled coffee, all of it shrank into insignificance compared to the pull between us. She finally took a deep breath, turning fully toward me. Her eyes were raw, unguarded, and it hit me. She wasn't just scared of being caught. She was scared of herself, of feeling something she thought she shouldn't. I can't pretend anymore, she whispered, voice trembling. I've tried to be careful, to keep my distance, but I can't. I stepped closer, my hand brushing hers, and she didn't pull away. My heart thudded so loudly I was certain she could hear it. Then don't, I said simply. I don't care about the rules. I just care about you. She swallowed hard, eyes glistening with something I couldn't name. Fear, relief, longing, all tangled together. You make it sound so easy, she murmured. But it's not. I'm older. I have responsibilities. I should know better. Better? I asked, voice low, almost shaking. Maybe, but we can't control what we feel. Only what we do next. There was a pause, a silence so heavy it pressed against my chest. And then she leaned in, slowly, tentatively. Not a kiss yet, just close enough that I could feel her breath against my lips, the warmth of her skin. Every nerve in my body screamed to close the gap, to finally let go of restraint. But I waited. Her hand brushed mine again, this time with intent, and I felt her trembling. If we do this, she whispered, everything changes. There's no going back. I know, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. And I don't want to go back. She laughed softly, a little broken, and it made my chest tighten. Then, maybe we shouldn't. The front door creaked again, but this time it felt irrelevant. The world outside the kitchen didn't exist. Her eyes searched mine, asking silently if I was willing to risk it all. I nodded slightly. She exhaled, leaning just a fraction closer. My hand moved to her cheek, thumb brushing against her skin, a gentle affirmation. And then the doorbell rang. Again. We froze, caught between what we wanted and the reality waiting for us outside. Her lips hovered near mine, breath mingling, eyes locked on mine with unspoken questions. Can we? Should we? Will we? Neither of us spoke. The room held its breath. The tension between love and fear, desire and caution, wrapped around us like a tangible thing. And in that suspended moment, I realized something vital. Whatever happened next, we had already crossed the invisible line. No one else mattered. Not her son, not the rules, not the age gap. Only this, the undeniable truth that had taken months to surface and only seconds to claim its place between us. I didn't know if we would survive the consequences, didn't know if we would ever be able to look at the world the same way again. But I did know one thing. I wouldn't let her go. Not now. Not ever. The doorbell had stopped ringing, leaving the kitchen in a quiet so thick it pressed against our ears. We didn't move at first, just stood there, inches apart, our breaths mingling, our hearts pounding in a rhythm that felt entirely our own. She laughed softly, almost a sigh, shaking her head as if trying to dislodge the tension that had held her captive for so long. "I can't believe we're doing this," she whispered, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Her hand lingered near mine, fingers almost touching, and I let the silence speak for both of us. "I can't believe I waited this long," I admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "Every time I saw you, I stopped, unsure if words could ever capture what I felt." But she nodded, eyes glistening, and that was enough. She understood without needing the words spelled out. The world outside had not changed. The rules, the judgments, the risk, they were still there, waiting. But somehow it didn't matter. In that moment, we had claimed something that was ours alone. A fragile, messy, human connection that could not be undone. We stepped closer, finally closing the gap, letting our fingers intertwine, letting the warmth of each other's presence erase months of doubt, longing, and unspoken desire. I felt her leaning into me, hesitant but trusting, and for the first time, the weight of the world seemed lighter. "I don't know what comes next," she admitted, voice trembling. "I only know that right now, I don't want to let go." "Neither do I," said, gripping her hand a little tighter, feeling the electric pulse that ran through her fingers into my own. "Whatever happens, we face it together." She smiled, a small, tentative thing, but in her eyes was a fire I had never seen before. The lines of age, the past mistakes, the impossibility of it all, none of it erased the connection we had, the truth that had finally been spoken between us. For a moment, we simply stood there, hands clasped, foreheads nearly touching, the world fading to insignificance. It was messy, it was complicated, but it was real, and sometimes that's enough. And then, quietly, without needing any more words, we kissed. Not the perfect, cinematic kind, but the human kind, hesitant, searching, full of the weight of months of longing and months of fear. When we finally pulled apart, I rested my forehead against hers, breathing in the faint scent of cinnamon and old books that had become our world. "We'll figure it out," I whispered. She nodded, eyes closed, letting herself feel the fragile hope that had bloomed between us. The door remained closed. The world outside still waited. But here, in this quiet kitchen, we had each other, and that was enough to start. C4.